It was supposed to be a normal Saturday. Sarah, my 8-year-old daughter, had been asking for the simplest birthday party for months. No big venue, no fancy theme. Just a few friends, cupcakes, and maybe some balloons. I thought I could handle it. After all, Sarah deserved a day that was just for her, away from the mess of everything else. But the problem with normal is that it doesn't last. Life has a way of poking holes in whatever semblance of peace you've managed to stitch together. My marriage to Ethan had been falling apart for over a year, though I tried my best not to show Sarah. The divorce papers were on the kitchen counter, just waiting to be signed, but that was never easy, especially when the person you're divorcing is the father of your child. Ethan and I had been fighting constantly about money, about trust, about everything, and somehow we still had to act like normal parents. Even now, as I pulled out the cupcake tins and tried to make everything perfect, I knew that normal was a fantasy. I baked cupcakes from scratch because it felt like a thing that mothers do in movies, even though I knew I could have easily just bought them from the store. The house was filled with streamers, party hats, and the laughter of children who didn't know better than to ask questions. I invited a few parents to stay, something I would later regret, but I was trying to keep up appearances. The awkwardness was thick in the air, but Sarah was happy, and that's what mattered. For her, at least, everything seemed normal. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts, and I opened the door to find a delivery man holding a large, neat package wrapped in a white envelope. I didn't recognize the handwriting at first. It was my mother-in-law, Janet's. Of course, she had sent something for Sarah's birthday, though she wasn't here for the party. She never was. There was a note on top, written in Janet's perfectly neat handwriting. For Sarah, open today. I didn't think much of it. I wasn't in the mood for drama, just for getting through the day. Sarah tore into the package, her face lighting up with delight as she revealed a plush bunny. "Oh, it's so cute," she squealed, hugging it to her chest like she had just received the best gift ever. The other kids crowded around, admiring it and everything seemed fine. Until it didn't. Sarah paused, her face changing. She tilted the bunny in her hands and stared at it with a look I hadn't seen in her before. "Mom, what is this?" she asked, her voice soft with confusion. My stomach dropped, and I turned the bunny in my hands. The seam on its belly was barely noticeable, but it was there. A thin line. A button. I wasn't sure what I was looking at, but the pit in my stomach told me this wasn't a coincidence. I told Sarah to go play for a minute, and she skipped off, leaving me alone with the plush bunny that suddenly didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a warning. I had to know what was inside. I took the bunny to my bedroom, away from the chaos of the party. I pried open the seam, careful not to rip the fur, and there it was. A small camera and a microphone. A spying device. My heart stopped. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. Ethan and his parents had done this. They had sent my daughter a gift, and inside it was a device meant to spy on us. The knot in my stomach grew tighter. I couldn't breathe. This was no longer just a birthday party. This was a game, and I didn't know the rules. I didn't know what to do. My hands shook as I stared at the small camera and microphone inside the bunny, realizing the full weight of what this meant. It wasn't just an invasion of privacy. It was something darker. It was deliberate. They were watching us, listening to us. My mind raced, spinning with questions I didn't have answers to. How long had they been doing this? What else had they planted? The thought of Ethan and his parents orchestrating something like this made my stomach turn. My first impulse was to call Ethan to confront him, but I knew it would be pointless. He'd deny it. He'd try to talk his way out of it, as always, and then turn it back on me, blame me for overreacting or being paranoid. It's what he always did. And honestly, I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of pretending everything was normal when I knew it wasn't. I had to act, but I couldn't just blow this up in front of Sarah. I didn't want her to see me unraveling, not when she was still so innocent in all this. I took a deep breath and tried to steady myself. I couldn't handle this alone, not in the state I was in. I grabbed my phone and called Rachel, my lawyer. She was the one person who might be able to make sense of this mess, the one person who had been guiding me through the divorce from Ethan. Rachel answered almost immediately, her voice sharp with concern when she heard my tone. "What's happened?" she asked. "Rachel, I need to meet you, I said, my voice a little shaky. I think they're spying on us. Ethan, his parents. They've done something to Sarah's gift. I need help, now. There was a brief silence on the other end before she spoke again, her voice calm but firm. Come in. We'll talk about it here. This is serious, Sarah. Don't confront them yet. Get the evidence first. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I felt sick, but I knew Rachel was right. If I confronted them without proof, I'd just be playing into their hands. I couldn't afford to look like the paranoid ex-wife. I had to gather the facts first. The drive to Rachel's office was a blur, my mind spinning with questions, with the sudden realization that my life had just shifted again, dramatically. When I arrived, I handed her the bunny and the tiny hidden device, my hands still trembling. She didn't say anything right away, just studied the device carefully, her expression hardening with each passing second. Finally, she looked up at me, her face more serious than I had ever seen it. This is bad, she said quietly. I'm filing a police report. This is more than just a privacy violation. It's an attempt to manipulate, to control. I could feel the weight of her words settling over me. I had known something was off, but now it was clear that this wasn't just about a birthday gift. It was about power. But Rachel, this doesn't just stop here, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Ethan, he's not just controlling me. He's after Sarah's trust fund, the one my father left her. It's not about her. It's about money. Rachel's eyes darkened, and I could tell she understood exactly what I was saying. We're going to need more than just this, she said, tapping the device on the table. We'll build the case, but you need to stay calm. Don't let him see your hand. I nodded, though I was anything but calm. Rachel continued, her voice steady. You have everything you need to protect yourself, but now we need to make sure we do this the right way. We'll take it step by step. I felt like I was drowning in the weight of it all, but I knew I had no choice. I had to protect Sarah. Nothing else mattered. I had to stop Ethan from using his parents, using me to get what he wanted. The next few days passed in a blur, a dizzying mix of police reports, lawyer meetings, and gathering evidence. Every moment felt heavy, like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. Rachel and I worked tirelessly to document everything, messages, emails, bank statements, everything that would show Ethan's manipulative behavior and his disregard for Sarah's well-being. The device in the bunny was just the beginning, but it was enough to send the message. Ethan, his parents, they weren't just playing games. They were trying to control everything, including Sarah's future. And I couldn't let that happen. I spent hours on the phone, arranging meetings, coordinating with Rachel, and trying to keep everything from falling apart. I had to remain calm, composed for Sarah. But inside, I was shaking. Every time I thought about what they'd done, my anger flared. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The hardest part was keeping Sarah in the dark. She was so innocent in all of this. She had no idea what was happening. No idea that her father and grandparents were trying to manipulate and control her life. All she knew was that she had received a bunny she loved, a simple gift. But that gift had a deeper meaning, one that would change everything. I couldn't let her see the fear in my eyes, the anger building up inside me. I had to be strong for her, to shield her from the storm that was brewing. That weekend, Ethan came to pick up Sarah for his visit. I knew this was going to be difficult. I had been preparing for this moment, but it still felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump into the unknown. I watched him from the doorway as he stood there, acting like everything was fine. He had that same charming smile, the one I had once fallen for, the one that hid everything. Everything's fine, he said, handing me a slip of paper with instructions for when I would pick up Sarah. You're doing great. I'll make sure she's fine. I just nodded, my heart heavy in my chest. I watched as he took Sarah's hand, holding her like he was the father she always wanted. She ran to him, excited for the weekend, oblivious to the tension hanging between us. I felt a pang in my chest as I closed the door behind them, but I didn't have time for self-pity. I had to stay focused. This wasn't just about Sarah's safety. It was about stopping Ethan from using her as a pawn. Later, Rachel called me. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the concern in it. The police are involved, and we've got the custody hearing scheduled. You have the upper hand now, but we need to stay smart. This isn't over yet. I swallowed hard, trying to process everything she was saying. The police were involved. The custody hearing was coming up. I had the evidence, but I knew Ethan wouldn't back down easily. This wasn't just about the trust fund, it was about control. And if I wasn't careful, I could lose everything. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Every time I looked at Sarah, every time I tucked her into bed, I felt a sickening sense of urgency. I had to win this fight. I had to protect her from everything that was coming, even if it meant losing a part of myself in the process. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and I was ready. I had the evidence, the recordings, the photos, everything that would prove Ethan's manipulations. I wasn't going to back down. I was going to fight for Sarah, for her safety, for her future. And this time, I wouldn't be silenced. The day of the custody hearing was a blur of tension and quiet determination. I had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, but nothing could prepare me for the weight of it. The weight of knowing that Sarah's entire future was about to be decided. I had everything I needed: the device from the bunny, the photos of it, the recordings, the bank statements, all the proof of Ethan's manipulation and deceit. It was a lot to carry. Too much for one person to hold, but I had to. For Sarah. I arrived at the courthouse with Rachel by my side. The cold marble floors seemed to stretch forever, and every step I took felt like it echoed through the halls. It was surreal, walking through those doors, knowing that the man who had once promised to love and protect me was now the person I was fighting against. Ethan, standing on the other side of the room, looked calm. Too calm. The look on his face was unreadable, but I could see the flicker of calculation in his eyes. This wasn't about Sarah. It never had been. This was about power, about control. I tried not to look at him, tried to focus on the task at hand, but it was hard not to feel the weight of his gaze. His parents, Janet and Frank, sat behind him, their smug faces already a reminder of what I was up against. They'd never truly seen me as an equal, always treating me like I was less than. They wanted Sarah too. They always had. Not because they cared about her, but because they could use her. And if I wasn't careful, they would succeed. The hearing began, and everything felt distant. My hands were shaking slightly, but I couldn't let anyone see. I had to be strong, had to be unshakable. Rachel spoke first, laying out the case methodically, showing the evidence, explaining how Ethan and his parents had been manipulating not just Sarah, but me as well. She spoke with confidence, but I could feel the weight of each word. Every document, every piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of Ethan's lies. When it was my turn to speak, my throat went dry. I had rehearsed everything I was going to say, but the words caught in my chest. I glanced at Sarah's empty seat in the back of the room. She wasn't here, but she was always with me in my heart. This was for her. I swallowed hard and began. I didn't want this, I said, my voice steady but raw. I never wanted to be here, in this place, fighting for my daughter, but I have to. I have to protect her from people who would use her for their own gain. I spoke slowly, carefully, going over the details of Ethan's behavior, his gambling, his manipulation, the way he had tried to use Sarah's inheritance for his own benefit. I didn't mention the spying device at first. I just let it all build. Finally, I pulled the device out of my bag, placing it on the table in front of the judge. This, I said, my voice hardening, is what they sent my daughter. A gift meant to spy on us. A hidden camera and microphone, all tucked away in a bunny she loved. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. And this is the kind of behavior that I've been dealing with. The room went silent. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, picked up the device and examined it. Her gaze shifted to Ethan, then back to me. "You have everything you need," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. "You've done it. This is the proof." I nodded, but the weight of it didn't lift. The fight was far from over. In the end, the judge didn't need to hear more. The evidence spoke for itself. "I'm granting full custody to Michelle," the judge said, her voice firm. "Ethan will have supervised visitation, but this court cannot condone the actions that have been presented here." I felt a rush of relief, but it was tempered by the anger still burning in my chest. Ethan's eyes flared with fury, but he didn't say anything. Janet and Frank looked stunned, unable to hide their displeasure. I stood up, taking a deep breath. I had won, but it felt like something was still hanging over me. The battle wasn't over. But I had Sarah, and that was all that mattered. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt the weight of everything I had fought for. The truth, Sarah's safety, her future, settle into place. I hadn't just won a custody battle. I had reclaimed my power. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was breathing again. The days following the custody hearing were a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. I didn't expect the victory to feel like triumph. It wasn't the kind of win that felt good in the traditional sense. There were no cheers, no celebration. There was just silence. But the kind of silence that was different this time. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence I had been living in before. It was a new kind of quiet, one that allowed me to breathe, even if just a little. I had Sarah. She was safe. I had protected her, but there was no turning back from the road we had walked. I had expected some kind of fallout from Ethan, but he was silent. For the first time in our marriage, he was truly quiet. He stopped calling, stopped showing up at random times, and honestly, I was fine with it. I had no intention of keeping up any more normal for him. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. What was left for him to say, anyway? He had lost. Janet and Frank, on the other hand, weren't as quiet. They tried to keep their distance, but it was hard not to notice their thinly veiled attempts to stay in the background. They would show up for the occasional check-in with Ethan, but I knew it was only a matter of time before they'd try to insert themselves into Sarah's life again. I wasn't going to let them. They had been part of the manipulation, part of the plan to control not just me, but my daughter too. I had been too naive to see it before, but not anymore. I focused on Sarah, on giving her the stability and love she needed. The way her eyes lit up when we talked about her new life, her life without that constant tension, was enough to make every sleepless night worth it. There were moments when I would catch myself smiling at her, just watching her play, and I'd feel a weight lift off me. I hadn't realized how heavy it had been, carrying the burden of trying to make everything work, trying to make him happy, trying to please his family. Now, it was just me and her, and I was going to do everything in my power to make sure she never had to question her worth again. She didn't deserve to feel like a pawn, to have her love and affection used against her, to have her safety threatened by those who should have been protecting her. I wouldn't let her grow up feeling any of that. But then there were moments, in the quiet of the evening, when I would find myself staring out the window, thinking about everything that had happened, wondering how close I had come to losing it all. There had been times, countless times, when I almost gave up, when I almost let myself slip into the role they had set out for me. But I didn't. I didn't back down. I had drawn a line in the sand and I had crossed it. And now, finally, I was seeing the other side. The money, the control, the inheritance, I'd managed to protect all of it for Sarah, but it wasn't about the money anymore. I had learned the hard way that people like Ethan and his parents didn't care about anything but themselves. What mattered now was that Sarah had a future that was hers, not theirs. I stood in front of her room later that night, watching her sleep, her small chest rising and falling peacefully. I knew the worst was over, but the scars from this battle would remain. They would always remain. But I had survived, and so had she. The hardest part was behind us now, and in the quiet of that moment, with the weight of everything finally lifting, I knew that no matter what came next, we would be okay. We had each other, and that was enough. The weeks after the custody hearing felt like a strange limbo, like I was treading water, just trying to stay afloat until the storm fully passed. Ethan's absence was as unsettling as his presence used to be. I wasn't used to the quiet. It felt unnatural, almost like waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Sarah seemed to thrive in this new peace. She was more relaxed, her laughter filling the house again, and I found myself letting go of the constant knot in my stomach that had been there for as long as I could remember. I kept to my routine, making sure Sarah's life remained as normal as possible. Her school projects, her dance recitals, her birthday party, it all carried on as if everything had always been fine, even though I knew we had just narrowly escaped a disaster. But I couldn't focus on the what-ifs. The reality was, we were safe. And for the first time in a long time, I could focus on building something new. For both of us. One afternoon, Sarah came running into the kitchen, her face flushed with excitement. "Mom, guess what?" she said, nearly tripping over her feet as she slid to a stop in front of me. I smiled, catching her before she could faceplant into the floor. "What, sweetheart?" She bounced on her heels, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "I made a new friend today at school. Her name's Emma. She's in my class, and we're going to have a sleepover this weekend." I felt a lump in my throat at the mention of a sleepover. It was such a normal, everyday thing for kids her age, but I'd been so focused on surviving, on protecting her, that I hadn't realized how much we'd missed out on. Sarah hadn't been able to just be a kid. Not truly, because I had been so preoccupied with keeping everything together. "You can have your sleepover, sweetheart," I said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We'll make it fun." And that's when it hit me, the weight of everything I had fought for. I wasn't just keeping her safe from Ethan and his family anymore. I was giving her the space to live, to grow, to experience the things every child should. Her childhood didn't have to be defined by all the things we had gone through. It was a relief I hadn't even realized I needed. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the papers Rachel had given me in preparation for the next steps. There was the trust fund, Sarah's future, and I had ensured it was untouched, protected from anyone who might try to take it. But then there was the divorce settlement. Ethan had signed it, reluctantly, but it was finalized. He no longer had any claim on the things that mattered. It was over. And I realized that in some strange way, it was almost a relief. I had been holding on to anger, to hurt, for so long that I hadn't seen how much weight it carried. Now, I could finally let it go. But there was still a part of me that felt the aftershocks. The lies, the manipulation, the way Ethan's parents had woven themselves into our lives like an invasive species. They hadn't just hurt me. They had hurt Sarah, too. And the thought of what they had tried to do, the way they had used her as a pawn, it made my blood boil all over again. I shook my head, pushing the anger aside. It was done. It was over. And then there was the thought of Ethan. I knew that at some point he'd try to come back. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. I could already hear the excuses, the blame, the way he'd try to make me feel guilty for not keeping things together. I had been the one who failed, according to him. I knew it was coming. But I wasn't the same person I had been when I left him. I had taken back control of my life, of Sarah's life. I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. This was it. The beginning of something new. No more hiding, no more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I had fought for what mattered most, Sarah's safety, her future, and I had won. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly free. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. A month had passed since the custody hearing, and life had begun to settle into a new rhythm. Sarah was thriving, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't walking around with a constant pit in my stomach. The silence in the house was peaceful. No more sudden arguments, no more passive-aggressive comments from Ethan, no more feeling like I was walking on eggshells. The divorce was final. The custody battle won, and the threat of Ethan and his parents trying to control our lives had finally been pushed back. But even in the midst of this calm, there was a part of me that couldn't fully relax. The fear that had been a constant companion for so long didn't vanish just because I had won. It lingered in the background, reminding me of how close I had come to losing it all, and how much I had to protect. One afternoon, I picked Sarah up from school, and as we walked to the car, she skipped beside me, humming a tune. "Guess what, Mom?" she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "What is it, sweetheart?" She twirled around in a circle before stopping and looking at me with a mischievous grin. "I got invited to Emma's house for a play date. She said we could do arts and crafts and make cookies. Is that okay?" I chuckled, pulling her into a brief hug. "Of course it's okay. You've earned it." We headed home, and Sarah rushed upstairs to grab her things for her play date. The sight of her running around the house, packing her bag with a sense of urgency and joy, was one I'd missed. She hadn't had moments like these for a while, not ones that were purely about her and her friends. In the past, there had always been an underlying tension, an awareness that things weren't quite right. But now Now she was free to just be a kid. I sat down at the kitchen table, still processing the fact that we were finally in a place where we didn't have to be constantly on guard. It wasn't perfect. There were still little reminders of the past, like the unsettling silence from Ethan or the rare text from his parents trying to check in. But those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. And with each passing day, I felt the weight of their control slipping further away. That evening, as I sat alone in the quiet house, I allowed myself to take a deep breath. The fear that had plagued me for so long was starting to fade. The tension in my shoulders began to loosen, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could actually enjoy the present without constantly looking over my shoulder. But then, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I heard a knock on the door. My heart skipped. I didn't have to open it to know who it was. Ethan. I'd known this moment was coming, and yet, when it finally arrived, I felt a surge of irritation mixed with something else, something colder. I didn't want him here, didn't want him anywhere near our life, but he wasn't here to fight for custody. He wasn't here to try to manipulate me into giving up my rights. He was here because he couldn't let go of control. I walked to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it. "Hey," Ethan said, his voice lacking its usual warmth. It was colder, more distant, like a man who had just lost everything and was trying to figure out how to get it back. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked, my voice steady, though I felt the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. He hesitated, looking me over as if he wasn't quite sure what to say. I just wanted to check in on Sarah. Is she doing okay?" "She's fine," I replied curtly. "She's doing better than fine, actually." I could see the flicker of regret in his eyes, the awareness that he was no longer in control of this situation. He was the one left behind, the one who had lost, and it was a look I wasn't about to pity him for. "I miss her," he said softly, his voice faltering for a brief moment. I thought I'd have more time with her. I thought she'd want to see me more." "She's safe with me, Ethan," I said, cutting him off before he could spiral into his usual self-pity. "She's not a tool for you to use. She's a child, and if you really want to be a part of her life, you'll show her that by respecting the boundaries we've set." I could feel the tension in the air thickening as his face tightened, the weight of my words landing on him. He wasn't going to argue. Not now. Not when he knew I had everything I needed to protect Sarah. He wasn't going to risk more legal trouble just to play the role of the heartbroken father. He looked at me one last time, then slowly stepped back, as if realizing he no longer had any hold over me. I'll see her this weekend," he said, his voice hollow. And with that, he turned and walked away. I shut the door behind me, leaning against it for a moment, letting the reality of it sink in. I had finally put my foot down. I had taken control, not just of my life, but of Sarah's. It was done. Ethan wasn't going to win. Not anymore. And as I stood there, listening to the quiet of the house, I realized that for the first time in years, I didn't need to be afraid. I had fought the fight, and I had won. Sarah was safe. And we were finally free. Life's a bit like a messy party. Sometimes you're stuck cleaning up after the chaos, and sometimes you get to enjoy the cupcakes. But here's the thing. Don't let anyone dictate your worth, especially not those who see you as a pawn in their game. Stand your ground, trust your instincts, and fight for what matters most, your peace, your happiness, and your future. Oh, and if you enjoyed this epic journey of redemption, drama, and a touch of humor, hit that subscribe button. You never know what crazy, life-changing stories I'll share next. And don't forget to comment. You know you want to.